Okay. Hi, Thomas.
Hi, how you doing, Marina?
I'm really, really good. I'm good. I'm excited for our conversation today. And hi, everyone who's going to be watching it. So I'm just wanted to tell you the topic of today. So we're going to continue talking about the relationships and parenting. And we're going to talk about various emotional demands that come up, sometimes very unexpected, throughout all the parenting journey. And I just wanted to introduce Thomas. So Thomas is a psychotherapist and a behavior change expert, and Thomas has been specializing in addiction and relationship for over 20 years. And he has a lot of experience in working with individuals of all ages, couples, families, and groups, and also experience of working in schools. And also Thomas has been doing quite a lot of writing recently. And just add, please, because I'm kind of getting a bit lost in the list. But yeah, so you've been doing a lot of exciting stuff, but all kind of working within relationships space with families. And you're also a parent yourself.
Yeah. I have two amazing, wonderful, beautiful girls. Yeah.
That's amazing. I have two boys. So yeah, okay. So today we're going to talk about the relationships, and I do want to kind of open up, I guess, just asking you a question that is, personally and professionally, when you became a parent, or perhaps maybe in your client work, do you kind of see what are the main challenges that people normally face? What are kind of something that as a society we don't really prepare ourselves for?
Ooh, tolerance is what comes to mind. Patience. I think there's a tendency, and I was guilty of this as well. I'm going to speak a lot from the I, and I see this a lot in my adult kind of client population as well. There's a tendency, I had a tendency for my children to behave like adults, and they had an expectation of me to have the patience of a saint. And these differences were so like different, the expectations. And I use that word lightly because I'm not one for like expectations, but I certainly appreciated the fact that I needed to have the patience of a saint, and I didn't. And equally, I expected like my 8-year-old to function like she was 38, and she didn't. And it was where I got lost in that expectation of wanting her to be an adult, to be able to respond as though she was an adult, and she wasn't. And I had to remind myself she is a child, and I had to remind myself that I'm an adult, and as much as I'm going to have patience, there's going to be times where I don't. So like, how can we kind of like just reduce the gap a little bit to be a little bit more tender with each other, a little bit more like understanding and compassionate. Just I mean, to be a little bit less kind of expectant. And just to be a bit more realistic, I guess.
And I think it's definitely something that came as it was actually shocking to me, when I've kind of had my older son, who is almost 5 now, but when he was kind of about 2, and he was kind of going through like a developmental stage when he was expressing a lot of anger, and he kind of needed a lot of support from me and kind of regulation, and and just kind of helping him to find the ways to express anger and to ground himself to come. And I was so lost, because that idea that actually now I'm the one who needs to help him, but I was also struggling with that myself, so he was kind of dealing with this like intense emotions. But then I've realized that as an adult, as you say, I don't actually necessarily have the skills to help him, so I cognitively, like theoretically, I understand, okay, he's a child, he has no idea what's happening, he's just feeling something that's really difficult to cope with. But as an adult, I feel angry myself. I perhaps even felt rage, I was scared, I was lost, whatever it was. But it was this whole idea that I didn't have the tools, and I wasn't expecting that this can be such a major challenge for me.
Okay. I like what you were saying there about the tools, because it's like, if I think about the way I parented, the tools that I had to parent were the tools that I grew up seeing my parents use. Or like my big sister. So I have two sisters. I'm the youngest of three. So my big sister, like she's like 12 years older than me. So she kind of was my mum, because my mum was out working. So it was left to the eldest to raise, as is often the case in a lot of households. So I guess I know how to be a parent because of how I was parented. Do you see what I mean? But then when my big sister left home and it was just me and my middle sister and my parents, that's where, you know, I guess I'm able to view what I still saw as my parents' relationship as a child, but then also look at it now as an adult and look at those differences, because it's like when my eldest, like she's 16 now, my little one is 8. So when like my eldest was around 7, 8, I started to realize, wow, I'm starting to sound like my mum and act like my dad. And this
how
isn't
was
how I
it?
want it.
What?
It was really uncomfortable. And I'm thinking, this isn't how I want to parent. So I'm thinking the tools that I know, the tools that I've got, they're not working no more. I think, you know, things, strategies, whatever, they work until they don't. And then we need to think about what else we can do. Because I know that in that moment when I was beginning to sound like my mum and act like my dad, I'm thinking, I don't want to parent like this. Something needs to change, because I don't want to be raised. I don't want to raise how I was raised. Do you see what I mean? So I had to set about almost kind of sharpening my saw, as it were, you know, really thinking about what I could do to improve, you know, the way I could use my tools. Maybe what I had, like, for example, might be getting a little bit blunt, hence using the metaphor of sharpening the saw, just to sharpen up my awareness, my abilities. Because as I said, I didn't want to, some of those tools I didn't want to use anymore. They were, I couldn't use them. They were broken, they were damaged, they weren't effective. Do you see what I mean?
And
so I now know that.
For sure,
just to say, like, how I parent my 8-year-old is vastly different to how I parented my 16-year-old when she was 8. Do you see what I mean?
I know. And it's really interesting, because I kind of often think to myself that my younger son, who is 2, I always kind of feel sad, because I'm thinking he got like a better version of me in some kind of ways. He might disagree when he grows up, but I think, you know, and this is kind of another, I guess, question is really how even in one family, all children are always parented in a very different ways, because we're not the same parents. I certainly not the same parent, and obviously, you know, their personalities is different, and I think they kind of trigger like very different parts of me, you know, or I connect to them from very different parts. But I think what you've said is really so interesting and important, because I think that realization that I've also had, you know, when I've had my children, that, okay, I really don't want to pass on some parts of parenting that I've had. And I think then what happened for me was, okay, so I know what I don't want to do, right? But I have no idea, like, again, theoretically, I know what I want to do. You know, I kind of want to be this, I guess, you know, like an understanding, equal kind of parent that hopefully promotes a lot of autonomy. You know, I don't want to be like over controlling. I want to be like, I want to have a lot of empathy, right? But I have no idea how to do it. Like, I didn't actually know how to do it. Even that, you know, in that example with anger, I was so triggered by that whole process that I was like, wow, this is so interesting how this kind of very early learning that we have and we carry implicitly just reappears. And then I was like, I need to actually learn something that I've never received, so I can then offer it to, because I didn't actually know, you know, I didn't like know how to hold this intense feelings without kind of going into, I don't know, like saying things like stop crying, you know, or that's enough, or, you know, I've had enough, or why are you upset, you know, this like really kind of harsh, I guess, things that perhaps I've also kind of received growing up through various, right? Not only for parents, but just like society, you know, like that teachers or whatever it was, like the environment.
So if you think about then what's modeled by a parent and then what's mirrored by the child, do you see what I mean? That behavior, it's like monkey see, monkey do. You know, we mimic and we imitate what we see our caregivers do. So if our caregivers aren't modeling a behavior that is kind of healthy and helpful, then we grow up kind of repeating those that we grow up with then repeating those same cycles. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's interesting because you talk about not knowing, but how did you know? How did you learn to be a parent? If you knew what wasn't working and what you didn't want to do, how did you learn what to do?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, and I guess this is also sometimes it's just like it was actually quite a painful, I think, process, because it really meant getting in touch with the parts of myself that I really disliked, you know, and it was kind of just really recognizing and try to do it without judgment, which is very, very challenging, especially for like a perfectionist like me. You know, I always kind of go deep into, you're not good enough as a parent, you know, everyone is doing it differently, everyone is like able to offer that. So I kind of immediately my default kind of is go into that, you know, it's just go into that. So I think for me, it really just took a lot of kindness and self-compassion to just acknowledge that we're learning, you know, I'm learning how to be a parent to like a 2-year-old, you know, I'm learning how to be like a parent that I want to be, you know, I've never had this experience. Yes, everything I feel is kind of there, it's really valid, but just remove that sense of somehow I'm not being good enough, because I think once I know I go down that path, that's really kind of, again, a repetition of those, you know, transgenerational patterns where I'm just kind of parenting through that shoes or like shame or you know, being not authentic, like authentically me.
Yeah. And I suppose in your awareness, what I'm hearing is what kind of didn't start with you in terms of this intergenerational way of parenting can stop with you. Like I was saying about, I was beginning to sound like my mum and act like my dad, but I knew that something needs to change. I didn't know what. And this was why I'm asking how you learned to. Because for me, it was very kind of intuitive. I know what didn't work for me. So if I know what doesn't work, if I do the opposite, then that may work, it might work. But I can't keep doing the same thing expecting a different result. Because as Einstein says, that's the definition of insanity. But if one thing changes, everything can change. And the one thing that changed for me was the belief that I had to parent in this way, or I had to speak to my child in that way. The reality was that I didn't. I have a choice. I didn't have to do as was done to me. I was doing that because it's all I knew at the time. And I've got so much admiration and respect for my parents and any parent, because at the end of the day, we're only doing the best with what we know. We're only doing the best with the tools that we've got. And like I said, they will work to the point where they don't work. So then we have to think about what isn't working and how can it work. So this is where, for me, it's been led by kind of like my gut, really being led by my intuition, doing what comes naturally. Do you see what I mean? So I know if something doesn't work, what I absolutely know in that moment is how it can. And be willing to try that and experiment and give it a go. Because like you talked about being a perfectionist or having to parent in a certain way, well, we might not ever parent in that way. We might attach our well-being to it. Like, I have to be this to be that. My kids have to behave for me to be this, but they might not. Like, I was having a conversation with my friend the other day. We were having a walk, and she was expressing to me how disappointed and upset and frustrated she felt because her kids had done something. Like, they were away on holiday, she spent X amount of money on the trip, and they were still unhappy. But I'm like, okay, so what part of you is not okay with how life is naturally unfolding? Because the kids are just being kids, they're just doing what they're doing. but what part of you is attaching your well-being or the outcome of the holiday to, to that? So when you step away from that and you can distance yourself from the attachment, like you'll realize like it's actually me, it's not them.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe that somebody can put a feeling inside us. I believe that, like, for me, my feeling is generated by the thinking I have about my experience. Because my kids could be behaving in a certain way and I'm totally cool with that. But you might be looking at my children and think, God, can you get a grip on your children, please? Why are you letting them do that? But I'm okay with it. Because for me, they're just being kids. They're just expressing what they are. They're running riot, they're causing havoc, whatever. But I'm cool with that. Do you see what I mean? As long as they're doing it in a safe way and they're not harming or hurting anyone or anything, then that's cool. But there's part of me once upon a time that was like, don't do that, sit down. But who are we to contain, and who are we to not allow a child to be a child? We should be encouraging them the way I encourage my kids to have a go, have a try, see what you can do. Because if I don't allow them, they'll never try, and they'll grow up with that fear and with that caution. And then am I any better a parent than what my parents were to me? Not encouraging, supporting, do you know what I mean? Harnessing that desire to want to do and explore and create. I don't want to be, I don't want to stifle my kids just as I was, even like when I was a teacher. I used to teach design. So kids used to come into our class and just used to make whatever they wanted. I literally gave them a blank canvas. And other teachers had criticized me. Why are you letting them make that? They've got a tool in their hand. I'm like, so what? Let them express themselves. Let them create. This is a safe space where they can do that. So let's harness that, because all around us, like I worked a lot in the in what we call the SEND environment. As much as I'm not comfortable with the term special needs, it's for me, children and adults have additional needs. So these were children that were quite vulnerable and had lots of learning needs and disabilities. But they were always told, like, you can't do this and you'll never be that. Well, if they're always told that, they're going to think that, they're going to believe that, they're going to become that. So in the space that I was creating in the workshop that we had in school, it was just literally letting them come and create whatever, be whoever, really allowing them just to express what they're feeling, because we were probably the only, or it was probably the only space that they could come and do that, because at home they were almost wrapped in cotton wool because the parents were afraid that something would happen if they allowed them to. So when could they ever be,
And I think, when you said it's like, am I better than the parents? And I think for me, it's not even so much to like about being better than my parents, or because I do like completely, what you've said, I really recognize. And I'm really grateful for so many things, I can kind of like acknowledge so many great things, that were like passed on to me, and, and how much they've done for me, and the way they kind of knew, right, how to offer me like love. And at the same time, sometimes I do recognize that it's not, there are obviously things that I don't want to do as a parent. I don't actually know if it makes me better or worse. It's almost like I just want to do what I feel is like authentic to me, to how. But I think that there are kind of, what I've learned is that when I became a parent, I was like thinking, okay, I'm going to do the opposite. Everything is going to be different to the way I was parented. So it's like I've rejected everything 100%. So where, for example, I've had like very kind of rigid structure, I was like, I'm going to be all about autonomy. I'm just going to kind of be, yes, you can do everything, go and explore, really kind of respecting every like wish, just being this kind of go, explore. And what I've actually realized, that I wasn't giving my son a structure that he needed for safety. So I kind of like went from, this rigidity into chaos, and I think that idea that I'm going to reject everything wasn't working for me. And this is how I knew, because he was like, started having this really kind of intense meltdowns, he wasn't able to kind of cope. Well, obviously that's not his job, right? But it was just clearly, I wasn't giving him the structure that he needed to feel safe, because I think that kind of safety element of just, having some rules, having some boundaries is so important. So I think that, I guess, like accepting everything or rejecting everything is also sometimes repeating like a similar pattern, in a way that we say, I don't want to do, like, I'm not going to repeat anything, then perhaps they are actually some things that were helpful, right? And maybe it's just really about kind of going somewhere in the middle, and like seeing that it can't be that everything 100% was bad, or can it be? Like, I don't really know. I guess that's a question to you. Do you think it could be that someone would receive parenting that's so bad that you wouldn't want to like repeat any of that? Oh, I've lost you. You disappeared.
Sorry. I think, yeah, I mean, professionally.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I was just saying, I think, professionally, there's people that I work with that don't want to kind of emulate anything that they've picked up. If I think about my parenting, the way I was parented, I'm probably thinking maybe like 97% of the way I was parented, I'm not using. There's so much, literally. I'm thinking like there's literally 2 or 3 things that I've taken from like my actual parents. You know what I mean? My dad wasn't really the Hoover's just there. My dad worked a lot, so I don't actually remember spending a great deal of time with my dad. Like I remember he took me to Oxford one day. We did a lot of like went to football. Like I'm thinking like we didn't do like much. I didn't learn that much from my dad. Do you see what I mean? And this is why for me, like I didn't want a son. I didn't feel I could father a son. I wanted daughters. Like I've had 2 long relationships, a 10-year and a 5.5 year. And that's where my daughters come from. Now, when like when my first partner, when she was pregnant, like we never knew what we were having. And I pray to God it wasn't a boy, because I really feel like I could father a boy. I prayed it was a girl, and I'm not religious, right? I was brought up to be a Catholic, but that's another story. But I'm not like, I'm not religious in that respect. My faith is the universe. My higher power is the universe, and I believe in that, profusely. But I didn't want a boy. I was petrified. And then when she was born and she came out and I held her and it was a girl, I erupted in joy. I'm like, it's a girl. It's like everything I ever wanted. And then that song by U2, It's a Beautiful Day, came on the radio. I just melted. I was like, oh, this is like a moment. It really was.
Yeah.
But when my second daughter was born, like we knew what we were having. It was a girl, but I still didn't believe it. Even when she was born, she was in the incubator. I can look at her. I can see there's no penis. But I said to the midwife, that's a girl, right? She's like, yeah, it's a girl. And I was like, no, but you're sure? She's like, dude, look. And I'm like, okay. But I was that like scared of having a boy that I wouldn't know what to do, because I didn't feel like I was fathered. Just I mean, so I've grown up with women. My best friends are girls, got 2 older sisters, my 2 daughters. I guess I thrive better in that kind of female environment.
This is fascinating to me, because it, as you were talking, I'm really kind of thinking, because I've grew up also like with mostly boys around me, like my best friends were kind of men, most of them, until now. And it's kind of, I used to work in that car business, which is very male dominated. I used to do rally professionally, which is like 98% male dominated. And I'm really now kind of thinking if that's like really part of that like transgenerational stuff as well, or perhaps is like that, underlying unmet need of that kind of, I don't know, like male attention in my case. And, not like necessarily in a romantic way, right? But just kind of that like sense of closeness, being seen, being like acknowledged. And it's also interesting that I have 2 sons, that I didn't have like, I don't like remember me kind of thinking about, I guess, like if it's a boy or a girl. I was actually not even thinking about having children at all until I was like probably 35. That whole like idea that I can be a parent was never, you know, just like there for me. I never like was thinking about, you know, wanting to have children, you know, or even like marriage. Actually, it was also something that wasn't like even top 5. Yeah, I don't know, and I don't really know if it was really something that I didn't prioritize because it was all about kind of my career, or it was maybe something that I don't think I've deserved when it came to children, you know, like I don't really know. It could be something that I thought maybe I'm not going to be a parent I want to be, you know, maybe I'm not capable. Like, so when you were talking about this idea of being parent to a boy, I'm kind of was wondering about my also process, you know, and that not actually even like thinking about having children potentially.
And there's probably other people out there with similar experiences that are listening that identify with this. But, you know, similar to you, I was quite resigned to the fact that, you know, I might not have kids. I was in a long-term relationship. You know, my partner at the time, you know, she didn't think that she could have kids, and we were just cool, just doing our thing. And then one day she got pregnant, and it's like, wow, we didn't think that would happen, but it did. And it's like, okay, so we're going to be parents. And it goes back to the question we're asking in the beginning, how do we be parents? I think for me, I just knew there was something innate. There was something very, very natural that I just knew what to do in that moment, to pick her up, to hold her, to nourish her, you know, to feed her. There was just something which was very instinctive, very caring. It just kind of took over, but nothing else mattered. She was my priority. She was my life. You know, there was things that I sacrificed and stopped doing as a result of the fact that I was now a parent. Like, it's like almost like I kind of grew up, you know, like instantly. It's like, whoa. And I was like in my 30s, like I'm 47 now. My eldest is like 16 and a half. She'll be 17 now in October. So I was like just touching 30, 31, you know, he was born. And then my youngest, like in that relationship, like I was cool with one. I thought that was me. I was touching 40. I can see 40. I was like, yes, I'm getting to 40 and I'm not going to have any more kids. And then boom, it happened again. Like it does to so many of us. We think we kind of got our life back, and then we have another child, 40, and it's like, God, back to nappies. I'm not going near nappies now, by the way. I'm cool with 2. But it just kind of hit me again. I was like, wow, got another one. Got another one.
Because and it's like it's such a different journey every time, right? Because I think it's almost like when I'm thinking, you know, about this whole, you know, journey and the learning, you know, like before, I think you were talking, you know, about kind of that 97% you said of parenting and you wouldn't kind of be using with your children. And I'm thinking it's like the learning that we consciously understand and aware of, but I was like thinking how much we actually learn that we unconsciously carry, you know, how much of that like learning is implicit, how much of those memories are implicit, and just, you know, kind of relating it to this different journeys of like parenting. I think you know, I really kind of had that, I guess, like an attachment or like bonding, or kind of like the whole like process of transitioning into being a parent, that for me was like very different to what you were kind of like describing, that, you know, like strong sense of being in love and, you know, an attachment, like that kind of instinct, you know, basically like that kind of an immediate bond. For me, it was like really a process of getting kind of to know each other, you know, and then like that bond. So I wasn't, because, you know, like the kind of whatever like was like surrounding my birth, and like there was like some like trauma there, but anyway, it's like a different conversation. But I'm just like saying, I really work with a lot of parents who kind of don't have that like immediate, you know, just woo, now I'm a parent, now I'm completely in love, now this is my life. So I just really want to kind of recognize and even normalize that we would all have our different journeys, and sometimes with different children those journeys are going to be different, you know, and sometimes it takes time to kind of build that bond, build that attachment. Like it just happens, right? And
it does. But it depends as well, because like for me, like I've had 2 long relationships and have had 2 children, and there's people out there as well listening that will be able to relate to that, because like you said, it's about the bond. You know, think about the relationship you might have with the respective mother. as well, what that is like. Is that harmonious or acrimonious? Do you see what I mean? And I know that when my second child came along, like, we really wasn't expecting to be pregnant with that. That wasn't in the that wasn't script, you know, but we made room, you know, for her and accommodated her very, 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 very kind of, I suppose the word easily is coming into mind. Just kind of slots, you know, to the family unit. So yeah, I mean, it's, there is a lot to be said for that. The bond, and how sometimes there isn't, because I know that what you're talking about there was very synonymous with the mother of my first child. You know, there wasn't straight away, there was a little bit of a disconnection. So I kind of came in and did what I had to do. But it was difficult because not everybody does bond. Like you say, the trauma of childbirth. Witnessing what she went through was like, oh my God, that was the woman I loved. Like how watching her go through that was crucifying. It really was. And that's what I'm saying, like innately there's this knowing, just like, need to step up, need to do this, need to do that, just get done, just do it. Nothing else matters. Like this, I mean, I was petrified. This is what do you mean take the baby home? Where's the rule book? Where's the manual? Like, you know, but through my development as an individual, as a therapist, I've been so privileged to be able to undertake certain parenting programs. Some of them I've been instructed to do, you know, being someone who's gone through the family court process, it was put to me, you know, by Kafkas that I needed to do a program called The Incredible Years. And I initially resisted it. But then when I looked into it, and I could see it was developed by a lady called Carolyn Webster Stratton, whose work was underpinned by the work of Albert Bandura. And Albert Bandura was somebody who I studied intensely as part of my master's in addiction psychology, because I don't know if you've heard of Albert Bandura.
No.
Is social learning theory, and how we learn through the observation of others, and equally how children learn through the observation of said parents. So if what we're modeling is being mirrored and it's not helpful, then what are we setting our children up for? Do you see what I mean? So I know that my parents were just doing the best with what they had, with the best with what they knew, but it worked until it didn't work. So it was like, thank you, I've took this, I've learned that, but now I need to go and do my thing. So that's where the work of The Incredible Years, my own therapy that I was in at the time, really helped me to know a way forward. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Incredible Years program as well.
No.
But if there's anybody listening that would really love to know more about an amazing program to help you parent, then go and check out The Incredible Years. It is delivered here in the UK and in Europe. It's an American-based program as well, but I mean, we can put some links in the show notes.
We're going to put the links.
They can you know, they can write to us and we can, you know, signpost them accordingly. But there was also another book by Pranksky. I'm not sure if it was George or Jack Pranksky, but it was like, somebody should have told us. And it's the book you wish your parents had read.
This is Philippa. I'm going to link this book. It's a good one. I'm actually going to link like a couple of books about transgenerational trauma. But I think, you know, I guess really an important message with what you're saying, that one, we do actually learn by this modeling, that it's not, you know, what we hear verbally, that it's really, all of us learn by seeing what other people are doing. And very often what parents say and what they do is completely different things, right? So it's not so much. And I think the second part that really, you know, stay with me, and I just want to highlight that it's absolutely okay to decide what you want to pass on, because, you know, there is a thing that's called unconscious loyalty. And I think many parents who are struggling with this whole idea of they think they're going to judge their parents, you know, they're going to think that they're bad, you know, that they were not like something around this we're going to reject, you know, we're not going to be able to keep the relationship, we're going to go kind of deep into thinking what hasn't worked. And I just want, you know, I think piggyback on what you're saying, that it's really not about blaming or, you know, just, and that's okay as well, right? Because sometimes that kind of suppressed anger or whatever comes up, or sadness or grief, is also really important. But it's not so much about blaming. It is really about what you're saying, it's just about having that choice of, okay, so how do I want to be? What kind of parent I want to be. And it doesn't mean that there is some kind of disloyalty to your family.
No.
It doesn't mean that you don't belong, because it can be terrifying to think, if I start like uncovering this whole skeletons, or if I'll start like going deeper, then I'm not going to be belonging anymore, or I'm not going to be a part of the family, right? It is quite scary to think that.
It is. I mean, I love what you're saying about unconscious loyalty, and I think we could probably do a whole nother podcast on that.
Yeah,
as well.
I know. It's not me, by the way. It's Hellinger, but yeah, it's like,
I know, as a concept, as a theory.
Yeah,
because it's how loyal
true.
a child might be to a parent or caregiver, despite the dysfunction that's being presented.
Always.
There is this tendency to be by their side no matter what. And to tolerate that. So when we're thinking about the 4 parenting styles, what is it that, even if you think about the child, that is almost kind of being permissive in their kind of tolerance of said behavior? What is it about the parent that is perhaps being very, unboundaried, to be able to appreciate the fact that the impact, or to appreciate the impact their parenting is having on their young? Do you see what I mean? Because the young is then growing up aware of that, thinking that it's the norm, and then emulating that in their relationships. And until they're called out on it, we'll think it's quite acceptable to do that. Do you see what I mean? And then when they're called out on it, it's like their whole belief system is just like called into question, and it's like they're being attacked, and then what they're doing to defend themselves, and then what they might do then in order to survive. Do you see what I mean? So there's shame that comes up there. But really what we want to try and do is help our children to be a little bit more autonomous and a little bit more of themselves and their own thinking, so that they can find their way. And if we can encourage them to find their way, then that's going to be such a beautiful thing to do, because we know they can be informed by choice, to make the decision based on what we're telling them, or what we're suggesting, or what we're showing them as a parent, but equally, inviting what they think might be a right thing to do, or a right way to go, and having a discussion around that, rather than being particularly authoritarian and be like, no, you can't do that, do it like this. Well, I might not want to, I might not know how to. Just, there's a lot that's attached to that, so I think when you talked about blame as well, that was another thing that came up for me. But I think where there's blame, there's no accountability, and there's no responsibility. And I think in order to be kind of responsible, we need to take accountability. And the same with the other way around. To be accountable, we have to be responsible. Like, there's no accountability without responsibility. So what can we own? What can we take ownership of? To feel empowered. Because for me, almost like to own, or to empower is to own. So how can we own the situation? How can we own where we're at and admit that we make mistakes, that we are fallible? Like, I remember saying to my 16-year-old, probably about 2 years ago now, like, I have never been the parent of a 14-year-old before. You've never been 14 before. So how can we work together here to move forward? Because if I need to tell you about yourself, I need to do that without sounding critical or being criticizing. I'm doing it because I love you and I care about you, and I want to share with you what I'm experiencing. The same way, if you need to tell me, Dad, give me a nudge, this isn't working, that's not right, then tell me, because together we've got to find a way forward. I don't want it to be about you and me. I want it to be about an us. And it's that you're modeling a kind of a way of communicating, which I hope my daughter will now take into her life. Because, like, we're talking about books there a couple of minutes ago. There's a guy called Mark Woolen, and he wrote a book called
Amazing.
Change My
so good
everything, right? But this is saying that intergenerational way of parenting, whilst it didn't start with me, it is going to stop with me. But I know it might take about 5 generations now in front of me for this change that I'm doing, creating, to take some effect. So it might not be until my daughter has her kids, or even my other daughter has their kids. So my grandchildren will pass it on to their kids, and their kids onto their kids. So it's going to be, do you see what I mean? So it's almost like what.
But I think is what you're saying is it's important to do our part. It's really important to take that accountability for what we're capable and what do we want. to change. And I'm just kind of, we will need to finish now, but I just really, I mean, this is such an interesting conversation. It's so important. We could really talk. I mean, I know I could talk about this for hours and hours and probably days and days. We are going to link some of the books that you've mentioned, the program that you've mentioned, a couple of books that I've mentioned. We're going to link all of that in the description. Please let us know what you think. What has your experience been, with kind of transgenerational, with parenting? What did you notice came up for you as a kind of that link, between how you were parented, how you were parenting your children? And just kind of share your stories, and let's talk about mental health. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for coming and for this really honest conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Marina, and thank you for having me. And a big thank you to all your wonderful listeners for listening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Okay.